43.8 million adults experience mental illness every year. That's a high prevalence of mental illness. Yet, why is it something we're still afraid to talk about?
Hello and welcome to Mind Ki Baat, a place where we discuss mental health. I am Shardul Katyayan, your host.
And I'm crazy. I'm insane. I'm a psycho. I'm mad, violent, I'm overdramatic. And I'm attention seeking. These are all words that describe me and anyone else that struggles with a mental illness, or at least that's what the media tells us.
Time and again, in discussions about mental health issues, stigma stands out as a common theme, and because of this, the challenges for people with serious mental illnesses compound manifold. Stigma, prejudice, or discrimination against people with mental illness or problems can be obvious, but more often than not, it's not that obvious. But no matter the form, it can lead to serious harm. Often, people avoid or delay seeking treatment due to concerns about being treated differently or fear of losing their jobs or how they'll be perceived by people around them. Because stigma, prejudice, and discrimination against people with mental illnesses is a big problem in our society. In this episode of Mind Ki Baat, we'll discuss the stigma that still surrounds or is associated with mental health.
Stigma, a mark or disgrace associated with a particular circumstance.
लोगों को लगता है कि यार इसमें हमारी बदनामी होगी कि मैं जा रहा हूँ अपना मेंटल चेकअप कराने, क्या मैं दिमागी पेशेंट हो गया हूँ, तो ये एक लोगों में शर्म.
This is what the stigma is, and this is what it does to people. It makes them feel like having a mental illness is embarrassing.
You never say to someone with a broken bone to just ignore their pain. That'll just pass.
हमको बुखार आता है, हमको शर्म नहीं आती. हम चाहते हैं कि जल्द से जल्द हमारा इलाज हो, और यही नजरिया हमारा मानसिक रोगों की तरफ भी होना चाहिए.
Unfortunately, many people with mental illness have been told at least once in their life, just snap out of it.
This is a Newslaundry podcast, and you're listening to Mind Ki Baat.
And for that, today I have two wonderful guests with me. Our first guest is Devina Buckshee, who is a health journalist and currently is a master's candidate of public health at Yale. She is also the co-founder of The Mental is Political and Pink List India. For our subscribers and listeners, so Pink List India is country's first archive of politicians supporting LGBTQIA plus rights. And The Mental is Political is a feminist collaborative platform, I would say, for mental health, social justice, and advocacy. She was also an assistant health editor and reporter with Quint during the COVID crisis. Our second guest is Mrinalini Ravi. Mrinalini is the deputy director of the Banyan and has been there since 2011. And for the uninitiated, Banyan is an organization which primarily works with homeless people with mental illness. The briefest way I can say it is to bring positive and sustainable change in their lives. And what she and her team do is essentially our topic for today. She and her team work to reduce stigma associated with persons with mental illness and in spaces that cater to them. Hello, Devina. Hello, Mrinalini. Welcome to Newslaundry.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to connect with you and Devina.
First, I want to ask you, Mrinalini, about this taboo which is sort of everywhere in our society. And you've been dealing with this problem for years now, I assume. And in many different aspects, I would think that you have encountered it on many levels, like policy issues and how people deal with it in their personal spheres and social spheres. So what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, thank you, Shardul. So firstly, I just want to say that stigma is not necessarily relegated to India. Stigma against persons with mental health issues have been a universal trans-temporal thing, so I don't think India is the only country to stigmatize people with mental health issues. What we can say is that, in fact, if you look at our history, or if you look at our texts and things like that, there are always conversations about people with mental illness that are somewhat taken as part of an ecological system with different kinds of people. So I feel that we have not really shied away from it, and we have incorporated into our indigenous or local medical practices. It's just that and I'm not saying it was without its flaws. Every system has its flaws. I think it's just that we have, sort of shied away from that particular conversation alone ever since there has been this sort of pressure, at least over the past 50 years, to be perfect, to be the best version that you can be. And we have set standards for what is best, who is best, how is best. There are no divergent views on what success constitutes, what good looks constitute, what manners constitute. I mean, everything was just so unidimensional in the way it was looked at. So, and anybody who is going away from that norm, anybody who's going away from that pattern and from that sort of life cycle was considered to be somebody who needs to work on themselves. And it's almost that society is bearing with the fact that they are different. So so I would say that's where, if you go to like origin story of stigma, I would just say that it's just been exacerbated as a result of sticking on to certain notions of perfection or notions of normal that we for some reason are being very stubborn to get away from.
So I sort of perceive it as we only have one mold to quote unquote mold our children or people into a perfect definition of perfect, if I say. And sometimes people just don't fit into it, and they fall to the side, they lack, and they are not able to do anything which they could have with a bit of support. Am I right there?
I can't agree with you more, because when you look at something called the social model of disability, what presents the onus on the society and not the individual to mold itself to accommodate all kinds of people. So if we're saying that, we have buses that are not accessible to people in wheelchairs, or text not available in Braille, or support for people with deaf mutism, I think then it is not really the individual's, it's not on the individual to make changes. It's on the society to say that, look, these are living, breathing human beings who are equal to us in every way. It's just that they are different. So the minute you understand that we are, all, each of our lives is just as valuable as the other, then we will make efforts to accommodate to certain specifications that people have. Like left-handers couldn't for the longest time access desks because it was largely for right-handers.
Yes.
So, we could go on and on, but the thing is that it is not on the individual, it is on society to understand that XYZ exists. Otherwise, you are just closing yourself off to a very, very significant reality and a contributing integral component of society. We're just casting them aside because we couldn't figure out how to make things convenient for people who are different than us.
Yeah, you're right there. And if I may say so, I think people with mental health issues, once they overcome their problems and they start to handle them effectively, I personally believe they can be quite good comedians, I would say. I have a bias for stand-up, but I think that situations people like us encounter, and we're talking about openness, so I am one of them. But once you're past those situations, they seem ironically funny. But nonetheless, Devina, let me bring you into the conversation. Being a journalist, you've reported on health and you reported on women's issues. In personal spaces, like I asked her, how does one counter that? How does one deal with it?
Yeah, when you said the story about, what your friend said, I was just thinking, is it that people, somebody with a mental health issue can only be with somebody with a mental health issue, like, where people from a different planet who, have 8 dimensions and can speak our own language,
yes.
And, have our own telepathic communication or something like that. No, so that's the whole idea is that, it becomes part of one common cluster, one common society that we're in with different kinds of people. And so I don't think people are not able to imagine people with mental disabilities or mental health issues. It's just, I feel the people who brush it most under the carpet are the people who need most help. because acknowledging the acknowledging different sides to you, different dimensions to you, some of which may be troubling, are something that you need to explore in detail and figure out, if it's something that you need professional help for, if you need to talk to about it to someone. So I think people are more scared of the fact that they will not be able to deal with it if it happens to them. I think there's more of a fear inward than it is outward, which is what gets projected in languages like, oh, you'll be able to understand the feeling, because there is so much terror within yourself that, what if it happens to me?
Yeah.
So I think it's that fear over not having a child with mental health issues. I'm talking about it's that fear of you developing a mental health condition. I think people are much more worried about that because, like I said, we are all made to fit into these nice little cubicles and molds that when we go outside of that, we are worried about how we ourselves are going to react to the whole thing. So I think the inherent fear of your own mental health is what makes you project stigmas onto other people.
Yeah, and I would add that it depends on the condition too. Some conditions are you can hide them easily. Some you need more support with. Mrinalini, now many corporates, many workplaces in private sector too have started to inculcate some programs or give space to people with different mental health issues. Like I personally know about autism. People who can work with it are now being given some space and some support to work in those environments. How does the first question is, before I ask how, are there any open programs which you are associated with or that people or companies, I should say companies or systems are inculcating in their structure to accommodate people with mental health issues? And one final question to it is, on a personal basis, when someone who's listening to this podcast wants to talk about these issues to, let's say, their family or in their workplace and open up about them, what would you like to tell them with your experience?
Yeah, so the best way to get rid of stigma is contact. Is more like Devina said, more testimonials, living next to somebody with a mental health issue, marrying somebody with a mental health issue. So basically complete integration of people in the community is what I think is the best, way of alleviating stigma.
That was just a snippet. For the full podcast, head over to newslaundry.com. And while you're at it, don't forget to power the work we do by subscribing to Newslaundry and paying to keep news free and independent.
The subscription model is something that keeps Newslaundry afloat, but we need hundreds of thousands of people to completely transform the news ecosystem. So you pay for news, so it serves you. So click on the link with this video, subscribe to Newslaundry and pay to keep news free, और गर्व से कहो, मेरे खर्च पर आज़ाद है खबरें.